Right, good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 o'clock and the hearings are resumed. This is the second week of the hearing sessions into the examination of the Harrow local plan. The usual reminders, please, all mobile phones switched off will turn to silent. In a moment, I'll ask the council to introduce their participants for this afternoon and then interested parties to also do the same. Could you make sure that your nameplates are tilted so that they're facing me so that I can make a note of your name when you do speak? And if you would like to speak and be brought into the conversation, then please lift your nameplate onto its side. And the microphone system, same as last week, the week before, if you were in attendance, try not to move the base unit, but it's the button on the right-hand side which should activate it and to turn red, and then please turn it off when you finish speaking. I'm not aware that there are any fire alarm evacuations planned, so there shouldn't. If there is one, then it is a real one. We're just discussing the remainder of matter 5 this afternoon, which is small site delivery and windfall, and then 5-year supply, choice of sites and build-out rates. So if the council could introduce who will be speaking this afternoon, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, so the following people will be speaking on behalf of the council. Potentially myself, Sarah Kabir-Sheikh, King's Counsel, barrister for the council. Mr. David Hughes, he's Head of Policy. Mr. Viv Evans, Chief Planning Officer. Mr. Gavin Bell, Ball, Principal Planning Officer, and Orla Murphy, Head of Development Management. They are all sitting to my left here.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Howell James for Nexus Planning, representing Taylor Wimpey.
Afternoon, I'm Sunil Kapoor. I'm a local resident concerned with the plans.
Good afternoon, Leanne Buckley-Thompson of number 5 Chambers, representing Barwood Land. And to my immediate left, I have Mr. Robin Upton, who will also be contributing on their behalf today.
Good afternoon, Irene Rusike, local resident.
Jonathan Schwartz-Briskin and Michael Schwartz on behalf of the Old Lyonians.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple of housekeeping matters I'd like to raise with the council first. So last week you sent through an email to the programme officer with various attachments on responding to matters 3 and 5. So just in terms of moving forward, and I perhaps should have made this clearer, what the hearing sessions do are make, so we have a running list of all the main modification schedules, which we run through at the end of the session, so everybody's clear as to what's been agreed, and there may well be other changes that occur after the hearing sessions. Secondly to that is an actions list of things that the council need to action. So it wasn't my intention that you feed those through whilst the hearing sessions are going on. So just from now on, could we just continue with making the list of all the documents that are being requested, and then on a separate column have date the council actioned it, so we have a complete list. But I do have some questions on what's been sent through. So I don't know who sent it through from the council.
The open space note was sent through.
No, I'm not on. No. This is the note matters 3 and 5, and it's lots of different versions of monitoring reports,
Right.
housing monitoring reports.
Right, so it's the monitoring schedules, I think. Well, that
Yeah.
I think is that Mr. Hughes? Is that you? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So just help me on this. So there's, according to this email, there's 3 different versions of the 2019 to 2020 schedule. There's version 3, there's one that doesn't say a version, and then there's one that says version 2. And then there's another one that's 2020 to 2021. There's one version of that, and then 2022 to 2023. And then there's 2023 to 2024. So it's there's three different versions of the 2019 to 2020, I think. So I'm trying to understand what the different versions are and do they differ from what's already in the examination library? And if so, what's the difference?
Ma'am, the email which I sent through had 5 PDF versions, attachments, and looking at the email, they literally had 20.
Sorry, the one I've received has got 8 PDFs attached.
Sorry, how many PDFs?
8 PDFs.
Well, like I say, the email which I've sent in front of me right now to the program officer just has the 5 PDF versions, each covering one of the 5 years, and then a Word version of the note to the inspector dwelling size mix. So I can't speak for what you've got before you, but in terms of the actual email that was sent, yeah, there's literally just 5 PDF attachments with the 5 housing monitoring schedules for
There's
those.
only one version for each year.
Yes.
Are they named differently then? I don't understand what's gone on because
Each one is basically housing monitoring schedules and then the year 2020, 21 or their respective year.
so 2021 to 2022. What version does that say?
That is version 2.
Version 2, yeah. So I've got that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sorry, list the other ones that you say that you sent.
Okay, so taking it sequentially, 2019-20, that's version 3. So essentially we've sent you the most recent version of each one over the...
So 2019 to 2020 is the one that's in the examination library, is that right?
That hasn't been added to the examination library yet. So the email we sent you
Yeah.
responded...
What is the annual monitoring report that's in the examination library at the moment?
Okay, so the annual monitoring report that is in the examination library at the moment is the full report that covers everything. These are literally the housing monitoring schedules since then. That gives you a complete set of that information, but they are not the full AMRs because, as we discussed last week,
Yeah.
there has been a period of time where we haven't published the full AMRs.
Right, so the one that's in the examination library is the full AMR. Yeah,
Yes,
and that's dated what years?
that is 2019-20 and 2020 to 21, so it was 2 years.
2020. And sorry, 2021, 2020 to 2021.
Yeah, so it covers 2 years, right?
Yeah. Just tell me the dates, otherwise I'll just pull up the document. The annual monitoring report that's in the examination library, what time period does that cover?
It's a 2-year period, so it covers financial year 2019-20,
Yeah,
and then the second year it also covers in the same document is 2020/21.
2021, okay. Right, so you've then sent through a housing monitoring schedule 2019 to 2020 version 3. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got that one. What's the other ones that you've sent?
So the next one will be 2020/21, and that's version 4.
You have to say sorry, 2020 to 2021.
It's 2020/21,
Yeah. And that's version 4.
yes.
Yeah. So I also have on this email version 2.
Version 2 is the next one, which is 21/22.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, 20, yeah, okay, version 2, yeah.
And then the next sequential one is 2223,
And that doesn't have a version number on?
but it does have the date October 2023.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's the most recent one.
And that's all,
And then the final one, Mum, is 2324. That has an updated date of 30th of June this year.
right, and then and then you've reattached the full report.
Not in my email.
No.
I provided a link to the examination website for the AMR for those 2 years, which we've covered.
Which 2 years?
2019, 20, and 2021.
And is that the document that's already in the
Yes.
examination library?
Yes.
Right, so you then reattach that, okay.
Yes, just for clarity in terms of what was discussed last week, where there's a question as to what is the most recent AMR that's in the evidence base.
Okay then, and then you say, council to provide details of 4 developments referred to at paragraph 4.3.2. Is that something you're saying you've done, or what's... Is that still an action that's outstanding?
That was a separate email. Yes, ma'am, that was a separate email from
Yeah.
which we sent. And that was,
So, sorry, you still saying that you're to do that? Or?
no, that was a separate email that was provided with an attachment that outlines the 4 sites that were referred to in terms of our viability discussion last week.
Right, and is that entitled Plan Level Viability Assessment? Is that what you've called it?
Yes.
Right,
Yep.
okay, that's where the confusion is. Okay, so moving forward then, don't drip feed the documents through because it just makes it very complicated. So just get all these listed on the schedule as actions for the council, and when you have these ones you've submitted, but don't submit anything else until we've finished the hearing sessions, and then we will have everything in one batch. Okay? Yeah, because otherwise it just makes it incredibly difficult to follow. Okay, and yes, I did get the open space note. I have to say it wasn't really what I was anticipating that you were going to do. You have to understand, I think I've made it clear that I can't go looking at what other people are examining in terms of other plans. And all that note tells me, well, it doesn't actually tell me anything about the Barnet examination, what the policy was, what any modifications were. And similarly with Ealing, you've just said that evidence has been accepted at Ealing. So I'm not to go looking for additional information on those different examinations.
Yes. And we can deal with that that particular point. I think the notes.
Well, sorry, the whole point is that you prepare something, and then that is then potentially discussed at a subsequent hearing. It isn't for me to say, well, you should have done X, Y, and Z, but I'm alerting you to it now because you've got that note in, and that will go on to the examination web page. And similarly, you've referred to some reference to the biodiversity evidence when we discussed at the hearing that map that's included is simply taken from the adopted local plan. So that doesn't tell me anything.
Right. The biodiversity map, where was that put in? Is that in the...
That's cross-referenced in the note that you've sent.
Right, okay. Well, the note, as I understood it, the main import of that note was to identify through the Atlas of Change map that there hadn't actually been any change or material change in the availability of open space. And that was the purpose of the map, of that document, was really to show that there hadn't been any particular changes. I think the reference to Ealing and Barnet was really just sort of additional information, but obviously it'd be helpful for you to have the policy itself. So we
Yeah,
can-
well, I'm not asking you to do those at this stage, but I'm just highlighting that, just saying that similar evidence has been submitted for other examinations isn't helpful to this examination.
Yeah.
I'm just highlighting
No,
that.
I understand that. As I said, I
I
think the
again, I
substance
think
of the note is more on the fact that the evidence before this examination that already exists, so it's already in the documentation, does demonstrate there hasn't been any particular change. I think that was the main purpose of that note, but fully take on board the point you've made.
yeah, okay. I think we've probably got a little misunderstanding as what I thought you were preparing the note for then, because I thought you were preparing the note to justify why you didn't need to update the open space evidence.
That is what the note's supposed to be doing.
Right, okay. Well, let's leave that there.
Yeah.
So if somebody at the council could get a schedule together of all the different actions, so separate to the main modification schedule, if you just keep that running as a live document and don't do anything additional with it, I will go through these documents that you've sent through, and they will then be uploaded onto the examination web page for the benefit of everybody else, under matters documents submitted subsequent to the hearings. So just to clarify then, Mr. Hughes, there is no difference in the data within this 2019 to 2020 and 2020 to 21 document. There's no difference in the data on these reports to what's already within the examination library.
Yes, they will be derived from the same source and just presented differently.
So that there's no difference in the data?
Yes.
No, there isn't, okay. And I'm going to repeat what I said last week at the start of these hearing sessions. So, reliant on the council to alert me to any proposed changes that they may be considering are necessary for soundness when we discuss the specifics of the policy. Could you also please have crystal clear in your minds, and I don't, reflecting on the week before last, I think I probably need to re-emphasise this to the council, that you really need to have in your minds if the policy is meeting the criteria of the framework in terms of positively prepared and justified and effective. Particularly, I think there's quite a significant amount of duplication between your strategic policies and what you're defining as strategic policies, and then the very extensive criteria-based policies that you have. So please have that in the forefront of your minds as we discuss the specifics of the policies going forward. Okay, do you have anything else to raise?
No, Mum, nothing else.
Okay.
Will there be a situation where open space will be revisited? Are they going to revise their note?
But they won't be revising the note. What will happen is I will write to the council when the hearings finish with a potential suggested way forward once I've had an opportunity to digest the document, the quite extensive document that's now part of the evidence base. So there's the PPG 17 report, which is several hundred pages long, and I simply haven't had a chance to look at that last week. So I need to look at that with reference to the note that's been prepared and consider a way forward. Okay. Yeah. But if there are any changes, then you as a representative would have an opportunity to comment on those.
I'm sorry, I did have one other point. The West London Alliance minutes, did you have any views on that, or is that something you'll look at later?
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to look at those. I was tied up on other bits last week, unfortunately. So, okay, so In that case, then, we'll move forward with the agenda as is. So small site delivery and windfall, which is paragraphs 7.2 to 7.4 of the MIQs. And this is with reference to Part 3C of Strategic Policy 3, which is on page 97. So if the council could just set out the overall approach to small sites delivery, please, as part of the plan period.
Certainly, ma'am. So in terms of the overall sort of approach, that's set out in our sort of hearing statement. But the key starting point in terms of the small sites delivery is obviously what the London plan says in terms of policy H2, and specifically the table that is associated with that policy, so table 4.2. And so that identifies a target of 375 dwellings per year from small sites. So those are sites anything less than 0.25 hectares. In considering that target in context, I mean, first of all, that is a subset of the overall target for Harrow in the London plan. So the 802 homes per year, the 375 is a subset of that. In terms of setting out delivery of small sites, we're very much led by what paragraph 4.2.3 of the London plan says, which is on page 167 of the London plan. And towards the end of that paragraph, it says, the small sites target can be taken to amount to a reliable source of windfall sites, which contributes to the anticipated supply and therefore provides the compelling evidence in this respect required by paragraph 70 of the MPPF 2019 at that time. So essentially the target that has been included in SP3, policy SP3 of the draft local plan, is essentially derived from that 375 dwellings target in the London plan. And that sort of sets out the overall approach in terms of incorporating that target.
Any comments on the approach to how the council have arrived at that as a target? So no concerns there. So in terms of the delivery then, what you've said at 7.2.2 and 7.2.3, could you, I wasn't following the last sentence and the last sentence of 7.2.2 and then the first sentence of 7.2.3. So you've listed out of various factors that have occurred since 2021, wider factors, and then you say the above means that housing delivery on small sites is likely to increase when the plan is adopted. How have you reached that conclusion?
Okay, ma'am, there's a couple of elements there. The first thing was the context in which policy H2 of the London plan was prepared. So its intention was very much to boost housing delivery from small sites. And the extent to which that would be boosted by policy H2 was considered in depth at the London plan EIP. But essentially the whole basis of policy H2 in the London plan is to really set out areas where development from small sites is anticipated and to create a positive sort of framework for that. The London plan itself was then finally published in 2021, and so the actual effect of that policy will have a bit of a time lag in terms of permissions coming forward and then being delivered in the context of that, in the context of policy H2 of the London plan. The reason why we sort of flagged that up and then also flagged up some of the factors that may have impacted upon delivery over the past few years was really just acknowledgement that in the short term, in the past 3 or 4 years, there has been a bit of a drop-off in terms of some of the delivery of small sites. But actually, when you look at, in terms of the actual effect of the policy and the sort of pipeline of sites going forward, we are very much close to already delivering on that 375 dwellings per year as envisaged by the London plan. So that was really just putting a bit of context, those couple of paragraphs, in terms of recent delivery, the purpose of what the London plan policy H2 is going to do, and obviously our local plan mirrors that sort of approach. And then so we would therefore envisage that there'd be a sort of constant supply, of around about 375 homes per year going forward.
And the way this is referenced in the policy, it says, so it's small sites as allocated and windfall sites. It says on Part C, and then Part D refers specifically to windfall. So how is that separated out?
So Part C of Part 3 of Strategic Policy 3 really just focuses on small sites, so any site less than 0.25 hectares.
Yeah.
Whilst it does refer to allocated sites, there aren't any real sort of allocated sites and small sites below 0.25 hectares. So essentially there's windfall on small sites.
There are no allocated sites at all.
In terms of small sites, yes.
Yes, there are allocated sites.
No, there are no.
There are no. So why reference that in the policy then?
That could be deleted, ma'am.
So your whole basis for small sites is reliant on windfall then?
Yes.
Okay. And is that I know you're going to say that the GLA said it was in accordance, but is that in accordance with the London plan and the framework in terms of allocating a variety of sites?
In terms of what policy H2 says,
Yeah.
it outlines in part, well, firstly, it outlines in Part A the sorts of the benefits of small sites in terms of contribution which they can make, and also diversifying the sources and types and supply of housing, and then sort of also the rest of those there. Certainly in Part B, it emphasises what boroughs should do in terms of 5 different aspects, ranging from an acknowledgement that character changes over time, looking at site-specific briefs, master plan, and housing design codes. Then sort of identifies that you can sort of identify and allocate appropriate small sites for residential development. And then also brownfield registers and permission in principle.
Yeah,
so it outlines a range of those.
Yeah.
In terms of actually allocating all the various different very small sites, anything less than 0.25 hectares, that's a decision which we chose not to do, simply by virtue of the fact that there would be a significant number of those, and you would never necessarily pick up all those potential source sites that may be suitable and may come forward as site allocations or as small sites. Sorry, it's no different to the approach is under the current local plan, which generally doesn't allocate any sites below 0.25 hectares, but which has delivered a series of sites, or sites from, capacity from small sites.
And just remind me on your call for sites, you sifted out below that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's in the site allocation methodology.
Okay, anybody, any comments to make on small site delivery before we look at the specifics of windfall? Yes.
Thank you very much. And I don't intend, as will be the case for the whole of this afternoon, to repeat anything in the hearing statement, which we still maintain. But at 3.1.1 of that document, my client had emphasised that there might be some additional points, having seen what the council says, because that really relates to the extent of the evidence that feeds into question 7.2, given that the council's position still seems to be, even after the comments that we've just heard, that they have compelling evidence to demonstrate that small sites will provide a reliable source of future windfall supply to address future housing needs. The housing data that's been provided within 7.2.2 of their hearing statement sets out the last 10 years and provides a 10-year average of 314 homes or units to be delivered. That's some distance below the 375 target. We make it just over 16% of the target, or 61 homes, that is short of. And then the 5-year average, of course, much more dire than that, 92 under the target, or 24.5% of the target that represents. Now, I've heard what Mr. Hughes has just said in terms of different reasons as to why delivery might have been impacted, but it seems the highest he put it was that the natural events that he's listed within the hearing statement may have affected. That's the highest that we get to. And even then, I don't see, and certainly my clients don't see, any evidence within the examination documentation that shows us the extent to which those factors have contributed, nor any evidence that gives any sort of reliability as to any change, such that the council have said that there will be some, without wanting to develop these submissions into where the world is at the moment. Certainly we are at least in a state of flux, and where the council's making submissions that there will be changes that give confidence in terms of delivery rates, I don't see where that is, certainly not in terms of evidence that's provided. It would appear when reading the housing statement in terms of matter 5 of this particular question that really it all stems from the London plan and the figure therein. But Madam, with the greatest respect, that's only one element of the consideration. The factors other than that the council has pointed to, as we say, we don't see where the evidence for that is. In terms of the healthy pipeline of small sites under construction or permitted, which the council say also points to delivery rate likely to increase, still only 365 homes per annum, so still 10 under target, and of course permitted doesn't necessarily mean delivered. The only other issues that the council points to is the capacity study, but of course capacity is only one factor. That doesn't mean that there is going to be delivery that bores out of that capacity. And then design codes, well of course that's commendable, but we don't have those nor have any clarity as to what the effect of those might be. So all of that being pulled together, we say does leave us short of confidence that paragraph 72 of the framework can be met, particularly there not being compelling evidence, we would say. And in terms of any comfort that the allowance is realistic, well, the historic windfall rates that I've just touched on and the expected future trends, as far as the council puts it, we don't see where the evidence is to support the submissions that they've made. But I won't say anything more than that. I'll just pause in case Mr. Upton has anything he wants to add. He's shaking his head, so I'll take that as a no.
Would the council like to respond on those points?
Yes, ma'am. So certainly in terms of historic delivery, there have been a number of years where we have exceeded or exceeded the 375 dwellings per year. So it is, certainly something that can be achieved. The pipeline of supply, I think, in terms of 365 dwellings per year, again, the NPPF paragraph 72 does allow us to talk about expected trends. So clearly that is, again, showing that, on average going forward for the next 3 years, we are very much close to that 375 dwellings per year. And notwithstanding any sort of somewhat dismissive comments about small sites codes, I mean, that's certainly what the GLA is indicating should be done to help drive delivery going forward, to provide that certainty. certainly what national government is also suggesting in terms of the benefits of design codes. So, it is something that is accepted at a regional level and a national level in terms of policy as being something that can drive forward delivery from a range of sites. So that is effectively, what is proposed. That's a statement of common ground which we've sort of reached with the Mayor of London in terms of sort of driving forward and increasing our housing delivery from small sites from what is already a relatively healthy pipeline. So that's sort of the evidential basis and also the policy basis at national and regional level for where we see that there will be an increase in delivery from small sites.
Madam, just very briefly in terms of 3 points that Mr Hughes made there. The first, he pointed to a number of years where the target has been exceeded. Well, certainly looking at the last 10-year period that's at 7.2.2 of the Council's hearing statement, in only 1 year of the 10 was there an exceeding of the target by 11 homes, and 1 further year where it was met exactly in terms of the 375 figure. So 80% of the time, the target has fallen under when looking back on those previous 10 years. The second point in terms of expected trends and the Council being able to speak to those, I don't doubt that. I'm not saying the framework doesn't say what it says. The point that we're making is we have concerns in terms of the level of evidence that demonstrates that the expected trends are as the Council say that they are, particularly given, as I've already emphasised, the may have affected comment that Mr Hughes made. And then the third and final point, we're not dismissive at all of design codes. The only point that I was making, Madam, as I'm sure hasn't been lost on you, is that we don't have them or have any idea of what the effect of that will be. Yeah. So that isn't sufficient evidence, I would suggest, for the Council to say, well, this is the answer. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Would the Council like to respond?
Just one point of clarification or accuracy. I read that there's 3 years out of the past 10 years where we've exceeded the 375. So 2015, 16, 2016, 17, and then 2017, 18.
Yeah, Madam, that's right. I've just looked at the table, yes, but still 70%.
And then obviously the 3 years going forward, we've got the average at 365.
Okay, I'll take away those comments that have been made in relation to that point, but parking that, could the Council make a note then for a main modification in relation to deleting the reference to unallocated sites, if that's incorrect? Okay, so we'll now move on to look at the windfall part of the supply. So quite a number of concerns have been raised regarding the Council's overall approach to windfall, and this is covered at 7.3 to 7.3. And you've summarised what those concerns are at 7.3.2. So as drafted, the policy differentiates as these at windfall sites that you're saying are on sites above 0.25 hectares. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So is your response, could you just summarise your MIQ response then at 7.3.3?
In the context of the question 7.3, our discussion very much just focused on the feedback in relation to small sites.
Yeah.
So we actually haven't specifically addressed any sort of, essentially Part 3D of Policy SP3 as such, because again, that part is really just acknowledgement that there will be other sites that will come forward that are on sites larger than 0.25 hectares, and that represents a valid sort of source of supply. But in terms of any of our sort of housing numbers, that hasn't been included. There has been no allowance made for that. So those would be genuine sort of windfall sites.
So there's no allowance made for windfall, but in effect all your small sites are going to be windfall, yeah.
So there's that difference between windfall large and windfall small.
And sorry, is there an updated trajectory? Are you referring to the one in your main modifications table? Is that the one that we're going to be looking at this afternoon?
Sorry, there's a main modification table that only takes into account changes to individual site allocation capacities. The MIQ response is what sets out the 5-year land supply and 15-year land supply position at the time of adoption, including allocations and windfall by year.
Yeah, so when we look at the trajectory, which document would you like me to look at?
The MIQ statements.
But there isn't a trajectory in there.
There is a conclusion that is a trajectory, and there's sites split up into 5-year periods.
Yeah, I can see where you've gone through these individual sites. Yeah, but we need to look at the housing trajectory for the plan period as a whole and at years 1 to 5, which is currently in the plan, isn't it, already? And then I think you've updated those figures through your schedule of modifications.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's correct. So literally the site allocation capacities, yes.
Yeah, so is that the one that we need to be looking at in terms of the trajectory then?
So that is the trajectory.
Yeah.
And anything
So what's the page number? Do you have the page number?
Uh, 294. Oh, sorry, of the mods document. Uh, 6 and 7 of the main
6
mods.
and 7.
We want that to update that.
Okay, so I'll have that to hand then as we move forward. Anybody, any comments in relation to 3D of Strategic Policy 3? No, okay. And then there was just a question regarding the estate regeneration section of SPO3, which is part 6. Didn't have any comments to raise on that in terms of your MIQ response. I think you've acknowledged that there is duplication there in terms of the latter, so I would suggest that part D there is deleted. Sorry, D and E. And then there's another general thing I've noticed on your policy. So some of them you seem to have a separate section regarding implementation or monitoring, and then some of them you don't. So I don't know what the rationale for that is, but as all policies will be required to be monitored, I don't think that wording is necessary. And similarly, in terms of implementation, surely the policy wording should be clear how the policy is being implemented. You shouldn't need something within the policy to tell you how the policy is being implemented. Otherwise, how can that be clear to a decision maker how to respond?
Yeah, no, I shouldn't, and I
Yeah.
agree with that. And I will look to,
So that's paragraph 9 there.
yep.
Right, and then we're on to 8.1, which is 5-year supply, choice of sites and build-out rates. So this is where I'd asked you to update the trajectory on page 294. So I can understand which sites are contributing to the outside opportunity area column for years 1 to 5, the 466 units, years 6 to 10, the 1211 units, and years 11 to 15, the 231. I'm not quite sure that Appendix A does that. So we're probably going to have to go through those sites now. Well, could you tell me how you think, how that's been addressed at Appendix A?
Appendix A is basically a table that splits all of our allocated sites into sites which are within the opportunity area and sites that are outside the opportunity area, so you can see which sites contribute to our land supply inside and outside the opportunity area, and in which period.
Yeah, but some of them you say 1 to 10, some of them you say 1 to 15, some of them you say 6 to 15.
So there's also a table at 8.4.19, which hopefully is a bit clearer. I certainly expect today to go through the 5-year ones, and where we need to clarify which periods they stretch into, we can.
So we're going to cross-reference the ones that are in Appendix A where you've said, for example, 1 to 15 or 6 to 15. You're going to now tell me how that's fitting in the trajectory as part of this session. All I was expecting there was a list, so I could ensure that those sites tallied with the figures that you've provided, but without having it split into the specifics of the 1 to 15, 6 to 10, 11 to 15. It's quite difficult to do that.
Well, I think the 8.4.19 table splits it out into the 5-year period and the 6 to 15-year period. And that's clear.
Yeah, 6 to 15.
Yes, so yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you would need to cross-reference with regards to 6 to 15 years, whether they're in the 6 to 10 or 6 to 15 or both. But the main issue is the 5-year, I think. And so we're splitting out which sites contribute to the 5-year land supply and which ones contribute to the 6 to 15 year period.
On 8.4.19, what does, when you say delivery period, plan making, what does that mean?
So So the plan-making period as defined throughout the 8.4 answer is the period between which we have monitoring data. So the last monitoring data that we've got is from April 2024. After that, it becomes modelling and projections. So the adoption is expected, as per our LDS, to be December 2025 at the latest. So the plan-making period is April 2024 to December 2025, 1.75 years. That's
Sorry, say that again. April?
2024
Yeah.
through December 2025. So the April 2024 date is the last monitoring data that we've got. So, you know, up until that point, things are monitored and their information. Beyond that, we're making informed estimations of delivery rates.
So when you say, so for argument's sake then, on OA16 Code Act, you're telling me that in that period, April 2024 to December 2025, there's going to be 737 units delivered on that site?
That's what our monitoring is showing, yes.
In
the past year and a quarter and the next 6 months. That is our monitoring figure, yes.
Okay. So sorry, why do you differentiate that to permit just the permissions supply then? Why is it different to what's at 8.4.18?
Because in order to evidence a 5-year supply of sites as of adoption date, we need to exclude anything that's going to happen before the adoption date.
Yeah.
So once we've settled on the adoption date, which is December 2025 as per the LDS, that 5 years has got to be clean.
Yeah.
No double counting. So we've extracted, you know, what has happened, or we've made the best guess that we can of what's going to happen before the end of December.
Yeah.
And then we only have sites in the 5-year supply that are deliverable as defined in the MPPF from, you know, 1st of January 2026. And so that's where the 5-year period is. So the 5-year period would run 1st of January 2026 through 31st of December 2030. So it's inconvenient, I don't know. The monitoring period, which goes by financial year, isn't the same as the 5-year supply, which would start on the 1st of January, because that's what the LDS says. But the whole point of 8.4 is to try and make that as clear as possible of what we're counting in which period. And that also helps to apply the windfall, both the existing supply of small sites and the future modelled 375 per annum. We're trying to break it down into years so that we can make sure that we've got something against every year.
Yeah. So just so I'm clear, so back at 8.1, when we tally up these figures, then you're saying that the delivery for years 1 to 5 should be 451, 6 to 10 is 1,162, and 11 to 15 is 210.
Sorry, 4.1.
Sorry, 8.1.2.
So that's what we put in our modified trajectory.
Yeah.
And that's in relation to the capacity of the sites, not the total amount in the trajectory, which would also include windfall.
Yeah, I can, yeah, okay. Well, does anyone have any general comments about the trajectory before we start looking at the individual components of supply? No, okay. So let's look at the sites that are, well, let's start at the perhaps easier side then. So let's start right at the end of the plan period. You've got allocations on 210 units, years 11 to 15. So which sites are those, please?
So outside of the opportunity area, looking at the table at 8.4.19, the sites that would contribute to the 6 to 15 year period would be...
So 11 to 15 we're starting with.
Okay.
So it's 210 units.
Yep. Well, logic 11 to 15, 01, 02, 08,
Sorry, 01, 02, 08.
011, and I think we discussed this last week, 018 should be 11 to 15 as well.
018.
Yes. But that was incorrectly referenced in the site allocation, I think. There was some issue last week.
Sorry, so you're saying 018 is in 11 to 15 years?
Yes, that's what the allocation says. So I make that 228.
228.
Yes, not 231.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
228 instead of 231, which is what we've... Well, that's what you've asked. Yes. And it would have been 203 instead of 210 if Walthamstow, Walthamhome had been referenced correctly.
Yeah,
018.
I'm taking that the figures that you've put in 8.1.2 are the correct figures.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, are those the figures that you want to work through today? So you've said at years 11 to 15 is 210 units, is that correct?
Let me just add them up again.
Sorry.
I think a quick comment from me. I added up the figures as Gavin was going through 01, 02, 08, 011 and 018.
Yeah,
And I got them to 224.
okay.
So 210 is 14 short. There's one site which has got 14 against it, and that's 08. So I think that may be where the 14 difference might lie, but I'll leave the detail to Gavin, just a comment from me.
Sorry, you don't think that one should be in 11 to 15?
That's
Right,
the one
okay.
that should be in there, yeah. Because that's where 14 extra seems to be coming from. It's 210, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what you've said, 210, okay.
Yeah, and I think the numbers are...
So you're potentially saying that that's in years 6 to 10 then, is that what you're saying? 6 to 10. Okay, and then years 6 to 10 is the 1,162 units.
So that's sites GB1, 03,
Yeah,
07, 09,
yeah,
010, 012,
yeah,
017, 019, 020
yeah.
and 022.
Right, I'm not going to tally those up here, but I'm going to, unless somebody from the council wants to do that whilst we're here. And then the remainder, the 451.
So sum of 04.
Sorry, when you say sum of 04, what, on 04, how many units are in the delivery period 1 to 5?
146,
146.
then 146 in 6 to 10.
Yeah,
Then 014, 016
yeah.
and 021.
Right, and then with the sites, so we're just focusing on outside of the opportunity area at the moment. So those sites, how, I think I asked the question about whether you've been consistent in your approach in terms of delivery information and build out rates and whether those are realistic or not. And you've responded at 8.6.1 and 8.6.2. So you're well aware of what the framework says in terms of deliverable and whether you've applied that consistently in terms of the commentary that's in relation to those outside of the opportunity area sites. So if we just go through the 5-year supply sites in the first instance, so 04, that site has planning permission, is that right?
Looking at explain 5-year land supply on Grange Farm.
You say substantive permission granted for a 3-phase regeneration scheme. So of the phases that you've referenced there, and you say phases 2 and B, 2B and 3 to follow, what are the 146 units component? Which parts of those are they related to an extant permission?
Thank you, Mum. So Grange Farm, there was a hybrid planning application which was granted in 2018 18 for a phased redevelopment. 89 units have been delivered on site in relation to phase 1. We currently are dealing with a standalone full planning application for phase 2A. The outline hybrid application has fallen away. So we have a scheme going to planning committee this month for the 44 units. So that phase is called 2A.
44 units?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2B is forthcoming. It's a council-owned site, as you might expect, as a council regen scheme, and the housing department are decanting the existing flats with phase 2B to be coming forward early next year. And there is prior approval for demolition of those buildings in phase 2A, 2B. And then, so that's up to the 5-year point, and then the remainder would come at a later stage in phase 3.
Right, so the only extant consent is for 44 units, is that what you're saying?
That's the one that's going to committee this month.
So there's no extant consent for that. So the only extant consent is for 89 homes that's been implemented.
Correct.
Right, so how have you followed what the framework tells you in terms of definition of deliverable then in terms of that site?
So our assumed date is December 2025, not today. So that's the start of the 5-year period. So we're basing our assumptions in terms of whether the sites will have planning permission by that date, not by today.
Right, that might work in terms of the 44 units if I take what you say in terms of that going to committee shortly, but is that realistic in terms of a scheme that's not even before the council yet in terms of site 2B? So you're saying that in December of this year, that site would meet the definition of deliverable in terms of the framework?
I think there is doubt over part 2B, the extra 102. I think the 44 qualifies and the 102. It's more difficult to say that it clearly meets the framework, yes.
So, sorry, is it realistic then to have 146 in your 5-year supply then, on the basis of what you just told me?
If I might comment on,
Yeah.
Are we confident that phase 2B will come forward in the first 5 years? Is that, I think that's the question you're asking. Clarify me if I've misunderstood it. So we've got 89 granted and built. Mm-hmm. We have 44 going to planning committee this month.
Yeah.
Which brings it to 133. We're expecting the phase 2B to be submitted next calendar year, which is 2026. Mm-hmm. The housing estate, the council's estate regeneration programme is a very active one. They already have consent for demolition of the buildings to clear the site in order to allow phase 2B to come forward. So the 146 in years 6, in the first 5-year period. At the moment we are, I believe, doing mental arithmetic while I'm speaking, just a few short of the 146 in the first 5 years. So yes, I am confident the housing team will build that out in the first 5 years of the plan period. In fact, I think they will probably go further than that. Correct me if I'm missing the question.
No, I need to understand that. So sorry, what you've written here, it says 89 homes implemented on site. Are you saying that the 146 includes that 89? No. So we're parking the 89 because that's already in the system. Yeah. And then I think what I need to understand is how the council have applied the framework's definition of deliverable. And what Mr. Ball said was that, well, actually, we've assumed that if we're taking the base date as December 2025, that's when we've assumed planning permission would be in place, and therefore the site would be meeting the definition of the framework. And I was asking that, bearing in mind there's no, what the response was, that it was a council-owned site, 2B, and it's not come forward yet. Is that realistic when we're sitting here in July to assume that it would meet that definition by December?
Yeah, I'll just seeking clarification on to get that correct. Yeah, we still believe that it's realistic that the balance will come forward in the 5-year period. Apologies if I misunderstood the part that 89 plays in that, but yes, the state regen programme is very active, so we still are confident that it will come forward in the first 5-year period.
Okay, I've noted that. The next 5-year one, at page 21, is Vernon Lodge, 014. So again, this is a question how this site can meet the definition of deliverable when you're saying that an application is expected late 2025, early 2026.
So, Vernon Lodge, which the table on page 21 explains, was disposed of by the council. We are in discussions with the developer to sign up to a PPA, and that's imminent. And we would expect the PPA pre-app work to commence very shortly with a submission early next year.
Yeah. So the question is, how does that meet the definition of deliverable as defined by the framework?
Whilst that site was previously owned by council, it's no longer owned by council, so therefore...
Sorry, I've missed that, Mr Hughes.
Because that site it was previously owned by council, but is no longer owned by council, then yeah, because it won't have achieved planning permission by the end of the year, then yes, it's something that wouldn't fall within that definition, so therefore should actually be later than...
So that should be 6 to 10?
Yes. But it is distinct to the other sites we've discussed because they are the ones within direct control of the council in terms of Grange Farm. So just making that distinction there.
Sorry, just repeat that. I didn't quite hear what you said then.
In terms of the certainty for Grange Farm site.
Yes, yeah,
that's a council
okay,
site.
yeah, you're saying,
yeah,
okay.
So that's I'm just drawing the distinction between the two there.
Okay. Then 016, so you're saying 014 should actually be years 6 to 10. 016, Travellers Rest, Kenton Road. This is that you expect a planning application to go to committee this year.
That's correct. We have programmed that planning application for an October planning committee.
And is that for that number of dwellings?
It won't be. So because that site hasn't got a planning permission on it at the moment, the capacity will have been taken from the capacity study that we appended to our site allocations, the matter 6.
Yeah, so isn't it more realistic in this case to reflect what the permission's going to be for, if it's a live permission?
The method that we've taken is that if it's not got permission, we use the modelled capacity rather than second guessing what the permission number will be.
Right, well, for my benefit, what is the permission number going to be?
So the scheme is a mixed-use scheme containing co-living. The description of development doesn't actually have the number, so I might need to come back to you in relation to the numbers of co-living. There are 109 flats.
Okay, yeah, if you could do that, please. And then 021 Amna Lodge. That's an extant permission, so the 141 reflects the extant consent.
If I may come back to you with that number, the description of development again isn't specific.
And then in terms of the sites within the opportunity area, sorry, does anyone have any questions to raise in terms of sites that are outside of the opportunity area? Now would be a time to raise that. Yes, Mr. Upton.
In terms of the sites outside of the opportunity area,
is this on your matter state? Is this on your statement, this, what you're going to read from? No, okay.
what we're referring to is effectively the updates that have been presented since we wrote our hearing statement.
Yep.
So in terms of Grange Farm,
so could you quote the number as well? It's just I tend to reference them by the number.
Sure. So that's
04.
04.
Yeah.
Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, so what we've heard on that one was that 89 have been built out, so they're not in the trajectory. And what Mr. Evans effectively anecdotally put was that he thinks that the rest will come forward. In our view, that's the definition of deliverable but not developable. So what we have is an application for 45 homes that hasn't got a planning consent. So we're in the MPPF category B scenario where the council has to have compelling evidence for it to come forward. Mm-hmm. We don't know. We've heard it might be going to committee in October. We don't know how long any Section 106 agreement might take, with the average 106 Section 106 agreement taking over 500 days now to be determined. Some of the consents in here refer to sites being permitted, but they're not. They they're pending 106s. So this is a Category B site. So our view is that 45 should come out, and so should the balance.
Madam, just one thing to add. The 45 that Mr Upton just referred to is from page 20 of the local authority's hearing statement on Grange Farm. But of course, the evidence that we heard referred to a 44 number. All I'd say is that the differing numbers and differing evidence that's being given only serves further to raise doubt in terms of the extent to which the evidence demonstrates that this site in particular, but also other sites, are going to come forward in the way described.
So we're saying that the whole 146 is Category B effectively.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, would the council want to respond on any of those points, or do you want me to just take what you've already said on that one? Okay. So let's look at the sites within the opportunity area. And I want sorry
to interrupt you. On the Travellers Rest site, we were...
Sorry, give me the... Sorry, I referenced by the numbers, so if we can...
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. 016.
016, yeah.
Always got a figure for the actual number that's forming part of the planning application now.
Mm-hmm.
So the total number of residential units is 166.
And that includes co-living, did you say? So it's 109...
So it's 109 plus 50, the equivalent 57. So it's 103 co-living units,
103.
which the ratio at 1.8 is 57, equivalent C3.
Okay, 57 units, yeah.
Plus 109 C3 flats, giving a total 166.
Okay, and then 021.
021 is 120. There's two separate consents.
Yeah.
120 plus 18. So 138.
So near enough what you've said there. Okay, thank you.
Mum, could I just come back on those two sites, if that's okay?
Yep.
So starting with 016, Travellers Rest, again, that should be classed as a Cat B, so it doesn't have a planning permission in place. We've got nothing before us to say that committee is going to happen. We don't know if all consultee comments have been addressed. We don't know if Section 106 heads of terms have been agreed and how long a 106 might take. And a general point, actually, is that what we've got is all 120, the revised, well, it was 120, it's been revised upward now.
Mm-hmm.
All we've got is that it'll be delivered in the 5-year period. We haven't got it broken down year by year. And so it's very hard to see whether or not the council considers that to be years 1 to 3, or are they squeezing it all in year 5? It's very difficult to establish with any certainty that they will be delivered within the 5-year period. And as it is a Cat B site, the council has to demonstrate, with compelling evidence that will be the case. And then 021, Animal Lodge. So that extant permission that's been referred to, well, it's lapsed. It was granted in 2014. There's a certificate of lawfulness to show that a commencement has been made on site, but there hasn't been any move on that for a considerable period. So again, I don't believe that is evidence of a deliverable site when the permission has effectively lapsed and there hasn't hasn't been any movement on site since it was granted in 2014.
So the basis, so we are in the process of considering a certificate of lawfulness in relation to commencement of development on site by the applicants, and we haven't determined that application, that is correct, but having reviewed the information, they are submitting that there was commencement on site through demolition of the previously existing buildings, and you know, in terms of actually determining the application, that's outstanding. I'm waiting for an ETA from the officers as to when that will be going through. It's under consideration, and we will seek to issue a decision on it imminently.
But do you acknowledge the point in terms of the framework's definition?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just ask the council, I'm pretty sure you have set out in relation to the site allegations, the year by year delivery. Have you not? I know you probably say that it needs updating in terms of what you've done here, but that is in part of the evidence space, isn't it? In terms of one of the housing documents, I think.
Are you referring, ma'am, to a literally individual year-by-year side of things?
So individual sites,
Yes.
and what you're expecting each site to deliver on an annual basis?
Yes, if that would be, I believe you'd be referring to the AMR from a few years ago.
Right.
Certainly not something that has recently been updated in that format.
No, okay. Do you want to just give me the page reference on the AMR?
Ma'am, so it would start on page 152 of that AMR. But it would be very old, so we could update it.
Sorry, page 152. Have you got the document reference?
It will be ODS 01.
Sorry, did you have another point to raise?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was only very brief. One thing Mr Upton referred to compelling evidence, of course, clear evidence is what we mean. But on site 021, So the site where there's the extant conditions and there's this reference to certificate of lawfulness still pending. Of course, our understanding is that there are pre-commencement conditions and we don't know what happened with those insofar as the extent to which those were addressed before demolition, and if they weren't, what the consequence of that would be. So I just flag that as an additional extra. It's not simply a case of, well, if there's demolition, we're okay.
Okay, so we'll start. Does anybody want a short break, or are you happy to carry on before we start looking at opportunity area sites? Okay, fine. Everybody else fine? Okay. Do you mind just opening the door slightly? Sorry, unless the noise gets bad. So let's look at sites that are within the opportunity area. Sites that you're relying on in terms of 1 to 5 years. Which are these, please?
Yep, OA4, partially with OA4, partially OA7, partially OA...
Sorry, so just pause there. So OA4, right, so then I cross-reference back to 8.4.19, so you're saying it's 75 units of the 323. Yeah. So 75 units, 1 to 5. Yeah, OA4, sorry.
OA7, so 50% of OA7, 35 years. OA9, then that's partial.
Yeah, sorry, when you're saying partial, you need to tell me how much within the 5 years supply.
572 in the 5-year period, 39
572.
before that, in the current plan making period, and 440 in the 6 to 15-year period. Then OA14, 300 out of 702. And then OA16, 1,783, which is completion of the site.
Sorry, 1,000.
783.
Okay, did you miss OA15, or is that not a 5-year site anymore?
Yeah, that's not part of that.
I mean, on the basis of what you've written there in the commentary, I don't know how you can say that's a 5-year site.
Yes, I agree. I don't see how that can be in 5 years. Must be 18 based on the description.
Okay. So then OA17, is that one?
OA16 and then OA17.
That's it, is it, for 5 years?
2, 4, 5, 6.
And then just run me, well, we'll come back and look at those in a bit more detail, but so just run me through the 6 to 10 year and then the 11 to 15, because I don't understand what you've put in the commentary on Appendix A.
So 6 to 10
Yeah,
would include OA1,
yeah,
OA5,
So not OA2.
Oh, sorry, yes. OA2 goes from 6 to 15, so
Yeah, you need to be clear about what part of that site is delivering in years 6 to 10 and 11 to 15. That's what I asked you to do in terms of the MIQ response. And then this comes back to the point that Mr Upton's raised about the council being clear. If you've had evidence in terms of delivery, it's not just a case of allocating a number to a 5-year period, or in your case a 10-year period. You need to be clear as to those individual sites, what contribution they are making for each year of the plan period. So on OA2, are you clear of that 399? What proportion or is delivery in years 6 to 10 and 11 to 15?
I mean, we don't have that split ready to hand.
You don't. Okay, carry on, please.
we're at 6 to 10.
Yes, please, yeah.
Yes. So OA5,
Yeah.
OA8.
So no OA6.
Again, that's the same as OA2.
So you don't know.
Ma'am, for those sites where we've categorised things from 6 to 15, we don't have those in here, but we do have sort of our own sort of monitoring trajectory, which could be used to derive those figures.
Which what? Sorry, I missed the last bit of that sentence.
We do have essentially an updated version internally.
Right, but why, when I
Yeah.
ask the question, I don't, you know, and again, this is sort of comes back to the point that if you're not clear as to what's being asked, and I'm pretty sure that was said in the guidance notes, please do come back and say we don't know what's being asked there. But the whole point of doing this is so that we can sit in this hearing session with the benefit of everybody else who has an interest in this particular issue, and we can delve down into the numbers and see very clearly what sites you are relying on for the different parts of the plan period, and discuss the detail. So just to say, well, it's 6 to 15, but we don't have that information here, isn't really helpful to the hearing, is it?
No, in the context of the explanation, no.
No.
That's correct.
So OA6 is 408 units, but you can't say to the hearing when those units are being delivered in that time period. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, ma'am, which site is that one?
I'm still on OA6. I think you're saying to me it's the same as OA2.
Okay, ma'am. So in the period 6 to 10, we would have 272.
So OA 6 to 10 is
72.
and then the remainder is 11 to 15.
Yeah, that's 136.
136, okay. Okay, carry on from OA 6.
OA 8, 6 to 10 years.
That's the 20 units, yeah.
OA 9 is split between the 5 and 6 to 10 year periods. 50-50.
Yeah.
OA 11 is 6 to 10, 201.
Yeah.
OA 12 is split between the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 year periods, 228.
Yeah, do you know what the split is between those periods?
We will. Sorry, it's OA 12, Peel Road.
Okay, ma'am, that is a equal split of 114 between 6 to 10 and 10 to 15.
114. Yeah.
Then OA 13, 20 in the 6 to 10. And that, Iceland Wealdstone, OA 15.
Yeah, that's the one we've moved to 6 to 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, OA 14 is split between the 5 year and 6 to 10 years. With $300 of them coming in the 5 year.
Yeah.
So 402 in the 6 to 15.
Fine. I've just raised the issue of the consistency of the approach in terms of the commentary that you've put here, in terms of the sites that you are saying are going to come forward in terms of a 5-year supply, and the sites that you're saying are either 6 to 10 or 11 to 15. So, for example, on 084, that appears to be a site that's at pre-app. But if you follow your logic through in terms of a site that's at pre-app, in terms of what you've said on 0A1, that cannot be delivering within years 1 to 5 for the reasons that you've set out. So I just need to understand the council's thinking process in terms of this. So what? Can you just respond on that?
So OA4, Havelock Place, is a wider site allocation. we've had multiple discussions with different landowners who are in different pockets, and we've just entered into a PPA with one landowner. We actually signed the PPA last week with a timetable to submit the application this year to be reported to the planning committee in January, February time, so early next year, 2026. And then the adjoining site, I've had discussions at high level with the landowner wishing to come forward with a planning application. I don't know if they're going to do pre-app because I think they want to dispose of the site, but they're looking at traditional C3 units. So we've had different discussions with different people in that land allocation, but we do have one firm PPA.
So it's quite specific about the difference of approach in terms of where you'll have. So you're saying the difference is you've signed a PPA on OA4, but that's literally happened in the last week. You say.
Yeah, at the end
But in
of
terms
last
of
week.
your consistency of approach, in terms of how you've assessed the sites and where they are delivering, what you've said in your responses at 8.6 is quite limited in terms of sources of information. It doesn't give me much to understand how you've arrived at that. Do you understand the definition that the framework gives you in terms of if there isn't a planning permission, you need to be having clear evidence? Yeah? And so where is that? So clear evidence that completions will begin within 5 years.
Yeah, we do accept that the evidence could be clearer in terms of some of those sites. But I mean, that particular site is quite a complex site, but we have a firm sort of pre-app and PPA sort of in place to take that forward.
But in terms, sorry to keep harping on, but in terms of the definition, how does that possibly meet the definition that the framework gives you in terms of deliverable?
With respect to OA4 and the first 75 within the 0 to 5 years, yes, we could accept that. The clear evidence is not there.
So what are you saying then in terms of that delivery then?
The full 323 would be outside the first 5 year period, so there'd be nothing within the 1 to 5.
Mr. Upton?
If I can just perhaps very first briefly make a point, and this probably illustrates actually the concerns that my client has had in terms of the extent to which the framework can be met. It needs more than mere assertion, something cogent, as I think, Madam, you're rightly picking up on. But Mr. Hughes even now is saying clear evidence isn't there. he mentions in respect of some of those sites. Well, we're not even clear as to which of those sites now the council is saying it is discounting from 0 to 5. We've just heard about one site where 323 will fall, but that's one site. That's not the plural of sites that he's mentioned. So it's really frustrating that my client has on numerous occasions asked for additional information that supports the council's position, or at least expands on the trajectory in the way that Mr Upton has suggested that it needs to do, and has simply been told, and he can give clear evidence as the exacts of what he's been told, but has been told, well, if it's required, it will be provided. When else would it be required other than in these hearing sessions itself, and certainly much before that, so that everyone can properly consider the evidence? It's just not good enough, to be frank.
No, okay.
We did ask for the trajectory information in March and May of this year, and we were advised that it was still being worked on. In terms of the site selection methodology, document ref EBH01, it says in there that the trajectory is based in the actual local plan table. We're based on the Reg 18 call for sites, but none of that information is before you in any evidence, ma'am. So there's no evidence before you on any of these sites to demonstrate how they've calculated any of the numbers at all. And just turning to OA4, that site was allocated in the former local plan 2013 adoption, and it hasn't come forward. So there's no planning permission, and it was allocated in 2013. So I think that's clear evidence that it's not a deliverable site.
Let's look at the remainder of well, actually, do you want to just respond on OA4 in the first instance, and then we'll look at the remainder of the sites that you're saying are not 1 to 5 year sites?
So, Mayor, in terms of OA4, that site was put forward as part of the call for sites by 2 separate owners. There has been sort of active interest in those sites more recently. So certainly, yes, it is acknowledged that it is an existing allocation in the current local plan, but there is now certainly active interest in it. So in terms of the site being developable and deliverable in the life of in the plan period forthcoming.
Sorry, Mr Hughes. Active interest in the site doesn't meet the definition of deliverable in terms of the framework. It's much more specific than that because it's relating to your 5-year supply.
I mean, my response was in relation to the general comment about the site and its history in terms of its current allocation, i.e. the current local plan.
Yeah.
So that was my observation there in terms of the fact that, yes, there is active interest now, so it's not that it's been dormant for the past 10 years. There is now active interest. So in terms of the life of the plan,
in terms of what, sorry?
In terms of the plan period, we would envisage that coming forward. So that's just the plan period. And then in terms of the discussion around the 75 that was identified for first 5 years, I did note and acknowledge that in terms of the active interest, that would not meet the definition of...
Okay, so that cannot be a 5-year supply site then? Is that what you're saying?
The 75 that is allocated towards it, yes.
Right, so let's go through the remainder of the sites that you're saying are 1 to 5 year sites. And again, I repeat what I've already said. I need to understand how the rationale for your approach in terms of sites that you're saying are delivering within that first 5 years, where they're at pre-app. On some of these sites, you've said it's a pre-app application, no formal application, so it's assumed to be 6 to 10, which I would say is correct. But on other sites, you've said it's at pre-app, and we anticipate a 1 to 5 years. So I need to understand the rationale that the council have applied to these sites. And then we're going to go through the sites.
Sorry, ma'am, are we moving on to specific sites now?
No,
Okay,
I'm going to give it one more go, and then I will move on. The response that you've given me, so the question at 8.6 was, what sources of information have informed the build-out rates and delivery information contained? Are these figures realistic and up to date? You've referred to the planning permission data. A bespoke trajectory for each site allocation has been provided to Appendix A. Well, I wouldn't say it's bespoke, but there we go. This information, I'm just reading out what you've said here, that doesn't tell me what you have used to inform, to understand how you have arrived at the assumptions that you've made in terms of where those sites are delivering in the trajectory. So I need to understand from the council's perspective how you've arrived at the judgments that you've made there, and why you've set out certain assumptions on certain sites. Yeah, because you've not, if you just said we've looked at what the definition of deliverable is in the framework and we've just applied that, then that's quite logical to follow. You haven't done that, so I need to delve a little bit deeper into understanding what you have done.
Ma'am, I think that really sort of hinges on what we consider to be the clear and compelling sort of evidence, and that's really going by the site-by-site sort of basis in terms of where there's distinctions between why we've actually allocated one site within a certain period and another site not.
Yeah, but there isn't any logic to what you've done here. Because on some of them you're saying a 1 to 5 year site, so it's at pre-app. Other sites you say exactly the same in the commentary, but that's a site at 6 to 10. So that I need to understand the logic.
I think the answer is it can only go in the 1 to 5 year period if we expect the planning permission to be decided by the end of the year. Whereas just there being pre-application discussions, it's positive, but it's not generally enough on its own to make it a deliverable site. So the sites in the 1 to 5 year period are either existing or applications that we would expect to determine by the end of the year.
Right, and in that context, do you mean a resolution to grant by the end of the year or a completed legal agreement?
Resolution to grant.
Right. Okay, well, let's look at the sites that the council are relying on in terms of 1 to 5 years, but I think there's going to be quite a lot of reworking for the council to do on this. So I think we've have 0A4, haven't we? Yeah. So that's not a 5 year supply site anymore. So OA7, that's another one where it's a current application, but it's not determined.
Correct. We have a live application which we're programming for a November planning committee.
Right, so it's already slipped from what you've said in here.
Correct, it's a live planning application and things change on them, yes. So we said September.
We said September, but we've recently received amendments to the scheme, so we've gone out for reconsultation which has pushed the programme back slightly.
Okay. The next one.
OA9. So again, we have a live application that's due to go to Planning Committee in October.
Okay. OA10.
That's not in there, is it?
Ma'am, so in terms of OA10, so that's a council-owned site, so, and there is an intention for that site to come forward. But there is no, well, in that case, there's no active application on that site.
Yeah, so how can it be a 5-year supply site?
Yeah, no, we can, we will accept that should be moved.
OA14.
So OA14 earlier this year, again a council-owned site, phased development to redevelop the council's leisure centre. Permission granted earlier this year for 149 units. With the additional 151 to come forward in a future phase.
So, well, I think you know the question I'm going to ask. You can second guess me. I'll be very happy for you to do that. Yeah.
I'll try and second guess you, ma'am. So I think the 149 are clearly deliverable in years 1 to 5.
Yeah.
The remainder will come forward in the later phase, 6 to 10. I'm confident the 149 it's a council-owned site in a joint venture partnership, and they're planning to start construction before the end of, or early 2026.
Right. So we'll add the remainder to the 402. Yeah. OA15, you moved to 6 to 10. OA16, this one is on site, is it?
Yeah, so that one is on site, 2 developers. All the phasing has planning permission, they're working through it.
And OA17 is a consented scheme, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Upton.
Thank you. So, just going through those sites. So we started off, we've already talked about Havelock Place, OA4. In terms of OA7, Tesco, again, it comes back to this point of it still being a Category B site, with an expectation of it going to committee. That previously was supposed to be September, and then now it's slipped to November. Again, we don't know when a Section 106 might be granted for this site. It's quite a large site. It's bound to have some large obligations. And without the year-on-year breakdown, we've got no idea, are they expecting it to come forward in a year's time and then gradually kind of build out, or are they expecting it to take 2-3 years and then building out at a much higher rate in order to deliver those numbers? And that comes back to the point that we're going to be talking about next. But so forgive me for overlapping, but it's how do we know that number is realistic if we don't know build-out rates and year on year, and any actual evidence from any of potential developers, as to what their expectations are in terms of delivery. Shall I go on?
Yep.
So A09, Poets Corner. Again, this was a site that was previously allocated in the former local plan, so 2013, and has only come forward now in part, subject to the current application. And again, there's doubt about when it's going to come to committee. And again, it's a very large site. We've got no idea if there's any outstanding. So I think this is the one that's being reconsulted on. We've got no idea if there's objections that these amendments are seeking to overcome, and we don't know if those objections have been overcome. I'm second guessing, but the point is that the evidence just isn't there. OA10's moved, hasn't it? Yeah.
OA10? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OA14, Byron Corner. Again, it's another old allocation that has only recently come forward. So we've heard that part of the phase 1 has got, well, it says in the updated note, it says it's permitted, but it's not. It's got a resolution to grant subject to section 106. And I believe that was in March 25. So already we've had many months that have come forward without any kind of progress on that. And again, I don't want to reiterate the point about without a breakdown, it's hard to see where that's going to fall within the 5 year. I won't repeat that point. 15's gone. OA 16 Kodak. It's acknowledged that some of the phases do have consent. However, if we look at what is shown in the actual Reg 19 local plan, it's saying that there'll be delivery of 2407 units at the site. If we tot up what is shown in the hearing statement, the council is now saying there'll be 3204 dwellings delivered at the site. So it's been quite a large increase in the number of dwellings. And in the update Appendix A, they referred to pre-application ongoing around additional intensification. So I'm wondering if that uplift is effectively anecdotal, pre-app category B without evidence. So it's unclear as to what proportion is consented and what proportion is projected and subject to pre-app. If it is the difference between those two figures of 3204 and 2407, that's quite a gap.
Yeah.
And then OA 17, the other Kodak site. I believe that's a co-living site. So we'd expect the 1.8 ratio to apply. I'm not sure if that's been applied. And again, it's resolution to grant. I won't repeat my arguments on that.
Would the council like to respond on that?
Thank you, Ma'am. If I comment on some of them.
Yep.
I'll start with the Tesco phasing query. How do we arrive at that? The Tesco application, a very, very clearly phased application. It's it's a traditional sort of hyper market size store in the opportunity area, very, very large surface car park.
Yep.
So phase one, which is within the first 5 years, Tesco are planning, that's where the first phase of residential development will go while the store continues operating. So that's where the new store goes, to provide for then the phased transfer of the existing store to there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's got residential above it, and then the second half of the allocation or the phasing takes place where the existing superstore is. And that is, we have updated you in the sense that we expect it to go to November, and that's because of that there is a very clear coming together of a number of very large schemes. So the Poets site is scheduled for the 14th of October.
Yeah.
Special Planning Committee. So we have been in discussions with the chair to sensibly organise the agendas. So that's why Poets is guaranteed to go to the 14th of October, so for a decision.
Okay.
And then we didn't have the space to put another application the size of Tesco on the same agenda. So that's either going to go to September or more likely of November. That's why we've been quite open about the possible shift between September or November for Tesco. There's no doubt about the Poets application. I think Mr. Upton queried, doubted whether it was going to a committee in October. It's very clearly scheduled for the 14th of October Planning Committee. So there's no doubt about when Poets is going. There are some very minor amendments being submitted. They may not go out for further consultation. They are that minor. So we will decide when we finally see them submitted this month. The amendments of Tesco are in, and they're out for consultation. And that's where there is a different scale of amendments there. On Byron, there was query about the 106 not being completed yet. Yes, it's not completed. There was some work to be done on aspects of the Section 106 agreement which have now been completed, and we expect that to be signed within the next few weeks. And I'll leave the matters on Kodak, both the main site and Kodak, the admin offices, to my colleague Orla.
Thank you. So, just need to get the numbers so that there's no confusion. OA17, resolution to grant, it was a mixed-use co-living and employment use development. 223 co-living units. With the ratio of 1.8, it gives you a total of 124 equivalent C3 units. So resolution to grant subject to Section 106, and similar to the Byron scheme, we're close to getting that signed. OA16 Kodak, in terms of overall numbers, so the consented scheme is 2,947, and we are in discussions with one of the developers to further intensify some of their phases.
But in terms of 5-year supply, you're saying it's the 1783, which was quoted earlier?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think what the council need to do is revisit what the information that you've provided at Appendix A in terms of the individual allocations, where you've allocated those within the trajectory, but be specific about the actual delivery for the individual years of the plan period, so it can be crystal clear as to when that delivery is happening within that time period. And taking into account the commentary that we've made in relation today, in relation to OA4, OA7, OA9, OA14 and OA15, and then on the outside the opportunity area, O4, O8, O14, O16, O18 and O21. Are you clear as to what's being asked of you in terms of what you need to prepare? Because if you have any questions, now is the time to raise them.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. So, year by year, numbers per year of delivery on all of the site allocations.
Each site, yeah.
To
So you will group them together. So your 1 to 5 year sites are these, and you'll give the site reference and the full name. Then there's the 6 to 10 sites, and then the 11 to 15. And if you've got sites that, like you have, where they are delivering in different parts of the plan period, you will just plot that across the individual years and then total at the end.
So it could be one big table that has all the sites and just a unit per year, or you want 3 tables, one for 1 to 5, one for 6 to 10, one for 11 to 15.
No, it's just one table, but you start with the plan period, starting as you have, and it goes through to the end of the plan period.
Yes. Transitional housing trajectory.
Yeah. You are clear, very good. Okay, so if we'll put that on the action list, we will, so not something to do in the next couple of days, and once we've finished the hearings, that will be prepared along with any other things that are outstanding, and then representatives will have an opportunity to comment on it. Mr. Upton.
Thank you, ma'am. I've just got one more point to make on OA16 Kodak.
Yeah.
If some of the phases are to be intensified, I'd be keen to understand if that's because those current phases aren't considered viable, for example. Are there fire safety issues that mean more development has to occur on those phases in order for them to be viable, and therefore if they're not viable, if they're not going to come forward for any reason as granted, it would be useful to understand from the council, you know, are those consented sites deliverable?
On OA16, are you attending that session? Are you attending the site allocation session? No. But I'm not sure to what extent the council can respond on that now, because it's a bit trying to preempt something that perhaps the policy officers might not be aware of. But I don't want to speak for the council if they'd like to respond on that.
So in relation to Kodak, OA16, they've already delivered 246 units of a phase which was to deliver 747. So I can't even do mental arithmetic. So 747 minus 246. So it leaves an outstanding of 501. And they are coming to talk to us about intensifying it because of the fire safety issues. But they do have reserve matters consent for 747. So that's the sort of baseline, I suppose. And we are open to those discussions. There isn't, we believe it can be accommodated on site.
Ma'am, I think what we've just heard is that there are fire safety issues on that. It's consented, correct, so therefore it's a Category A site. But the evidence that we've heard is that those consented phases aren't going to be built out.
I'm not quite sure we've heard that, but that's the assumption you're making in terms of... I think we're sort of in a bit of a world of trying to preempt discussions that the council are having in a development management perspective. And I think it's probably for the policy colleagues to bottom out with the development management. I think, you know, it's probably not the correct forum to be commenting on the steps that any preempts that the council might be having at the moment. But if the council can prepare what I've asked them to prepare, and is everybody in terms of a represent or content about being reconsulted on that, and what may, you know, if we need another hearing, we need another hearing. Okay. And then on everything else that you've set out in terms of this section of your MI crew, the only thing I wanted to just question, so I'm content with when you're starting the 5-year period from, and it was just a question about the lapse rates. Have you produced any evidence on the where you've arrived at the 17% from? It's 8.4.15.
Not specifically, but it's included in the monitoring schedules. So some will be in there for the years 2019 through 2021. Mm-hmm. We've got more full data, so yeah, we've gone back to 2012, 13.
Okay, and what about the period beyond the more recent period from 2021 to now?
It's those permissions won't have lapsed.
Oh, of course, yeah. Okay, so the 17% is taken from
everything that was permitted between 2012, 13 to 2019, 20. And then everything that, and then which of those lapsed, which of those permissions lapsed. And gross and net both came out at 17%, 16.998 for gross, 16.689 for net, which was reassuring.
Right, when you've redone the trajectory and then you reproduce your 5-year supply table, could you do 2 separate tables? Could you do one that includes your 17% lapse rate and one without, so we can see what the difference is? And clearly mark that this one has applied the 17% lapse rate and the other one hasn't.
Can I just ask for some clarification on 8.5.1 and 8.5.2?
Yep.
It says that pre-2019 there were 2,389 completions. Post was 2,187, and you've got 2,945 with planning permission. This is all in the opportunity
Yeah.
area. That makes a total of, so far, 7,521. However, how does that relate to what the London plan says about the 5,000 as being the capacity for the opportunity area? We'll probably cover this later.
I was going to say, yeah, it might
and
be a
also
more
there's
specific.
also the allocations then come up to nearly 10,000. So I'm not sure.
Are you attending the session where we're going to talk about
Yeah, I looked at the answers given for that session.
Yeah.
They didn't have all those figures. That's why I'm bringing up now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do the council want to? Are you due to attend that session or
Yeah,
not?
so,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I would like a breakdown of all
Yeah.
those.
Well, maybe
those
the
figures.
council can reflect on that as a question and prepare a response, unless you'd like to respond now.
Could the question just be repeated, please, because it's not been picked up here?
Okay, so I'm saying between the figures between from pre-2019, what's been completed and what's currently got planning applications, you've got 7,521. Then additionally, we've got potentially site allocations for nearly 10,000. However, the London plan says that the area's capacity is about 5,000. So how do those figures all relate to each other?
Yeah, Mayor, we understand the question, but we will reflect on it and come back.
Okay. So they'll prepare something for the set, so they can provide a proper response, I think.
Okay.
You have just reminded me, though, that on page 16, I couldn't get that link to work at the bottom document for the pen portrait. So could you make a note to submit that to the examination library as a separate document? Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'd looked at it from another source, but it would be useful to have that separated out. Did you get the link to work? Or no, okay. Okay, any other questions then in relation to 8.1 to 8.6? No, okay.
Madam, it was just to make the point that in terms of 8.6, a lot of what we've already said in relation to the general discussion relates in terms of the standard of the evidence, but just to make sure that that's absolutely clear. Yeah.
No, got a note of that. Okay, so tomorrow then we are back to look at, I'll just double check. It's going to be affordable housing and other housing matters, and that's principally Chapter 4 of the plan and policies H01 to H012 inclusive. It's not my intention that we discuss every one of those housing policies, but obviously if representatives have issues that they would like to raise, then they would that would be the forum to do that, as well as policy GR10. So that's the full day tomorrow, and I believe we're back in this room. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So we're starting at 10 o'clock. If everybody's content with. I think that was an error actually, because we weren't sure whether you wanted to start the sessions earlier or not. Yeah, 10 o'clock is fine with me. Okay. So thank you for your contributions today, and the hearing's adjourned until tomorrow. Thank you.